Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to connect with you again.
That's when my husband decided to raise us for an overseas opportunity, and it just moved so quickly. We had no idea. I envisioned Paris, but when he came home and he was like, Tokyo, and I'm like, Tokyo? Oh my gosh, I have no clue about, its culture or the industry there. So just started doing research, and it seemed like a blink that we were loading up and heading to Japan and embarked on what ended up being an experience of a lifetime for sure. Plugging into, Japanese workforce was a whole new experience. The way that they approach everything, even just like, I remember I went to the store and I ordered deli meat, and they had wrapped it in this beautiful envelope with a seal on it. And I was like, wow, this is the best deli meat I've ever bought. But from there, lived and worked for almost 5 years in Japan. And when my husband started to get a little bit of an itch again and into, once you get a taste of working abroad and all the opportunities that it brings you, it definitely compressed his level in the company. He started to get exposure and opportunities bubbling up in other places, take an opportunity in the Southeast Asian market in Singapore. We moved from a beautiful 4 pristine seasons to totally humid, tropical heat. Right. But Singapore as well, they have they managed to have their own utopia there that they keep very clean and orderly, and everyone's happy, living and working. And so we rerouted there, and before coming back to the US, big shift once again.
Absolutely. What was going through your head in those early days, and as you were gearing up to try to figure out how you could enter the market?
I definitely went through phases of awakenings, rude awakenings, when I was still in the US trying to transfer, and they had to break the news to me that they were like, we're sorry, we would love to retain you, but we just can't, place you over there. But there's once you touch down in a new country, you're so consumed with settling in, setting up house, figuring out how to get your paperwork and your visa and everything situated, that consumed me.
Right.
And then also being able to just explore. I mean, there was so much to see and do, and boxes to check, and learning the language that, it deferred me for a significant amount of time. So I didn't really think about it as much once I touched down in Japan. But then as the time started to pass, I was like, there's got to be something more here. And I actually went into consulting at first. I was writing a blog for a website that catered to foreigners. And it was just like things to see and do, and foods and recipes, and sort of an all encompassing what to do in Tokyo website. It just sort of lit the fire of just being the trailing spouse. But yeah, I did confide in some of my friends at the time who were other moms that we were working with the school on a lot of like event planning. And when I got the offer from ASICS, I actually was debating taking it. One of my friends was like, you should do it. Just,
nice.
Take it. And it stuck out. Like there weren't a whole lot of moms. There were moms who were expats, and then the dad was at home.
Right.
It was kind of the setup, right? And you'd see the dad walking around and drop off and pick up. So it was kind of like that was the formula, I think. It was drastically different in Singapore. In Singapore, all the moms work and different dynamic. I think in Japan, for Japanese native moms and women, typically after they start a family, most of them hang up their hat on their careers.
Right.
I think that they're moving toward change on that. And I think that there's desire to be able to hold career and be your own self-sufficient woman there. And I hope that they, make progress on that. In Singapore, it's wildly different. I mean, women are just in the workforce. They're out there. Just interesting, like comparison in the women communities between both countries.
But I'm curious about what it was like if you could compare the difference in the working culture, the day-to-day culture at the office between Bay Area and a tech company there, and then in Japan, and of course in Singapore as well.
I think that one thing that paralleled really between the US and Japan was the work ethic immediately upon walking into. And I have a little bit of a edge case experience in Japan because, I didn't walk into a floor of 300 Japanese people sitting there like my husband did. I walked into an office in Shibuya of a bunch of transplants that were we used to call ourselves the zoo. And I think what ASIC's headquarters set out to do was to really kind of hire a more diverse, globalized team in order and many of us spoke perfect Japanese. Here's present company included here. Others of us, not so much. But I think the whole goal was for us to help globalize the company because much of their transactional revenue was happening overseas. So it was happening in the US, it was happening in Australia. And so they needed a team on the ground in Tokyo that could really rally the regions together. The regions were operating very uniquely in their own space and running their own brands pretty much. We made a lot of headway doing that. But to answer your question, because of that differentiation, it was very unique. And so when I walked in, there was a little comfort in, my manager was French.
Right.
We had a Venezuelan, we had a Swedish, we had a few Americans, handful of Americans, which was quite in ratio in number with how many Americans actually were in Tokyo, which I want to say at the time I had learned from my blog, it was only like 15, 16,000 Americans that they were targeting as far as their like email. We were definitely quite a few number sitting in that office. So I don't know if it's the reflective of like the real true immersion in the Japanese workplace. I did get a sense of that when we would visit headquarters in Kobe.
Oh yeah.
So when we'd go to headquarters in Kobe is when I was like eyes wide, just seeing, they have a bell that chimes for breaks. Everybody's sort of dressed, somberly, and a lot of rules are followed. The cafeteria is like being back in college. It's meetings are very structured and not a lot is revealed of what people really think. I think that's a huge difference between Americans and Japanese. Japanese are much more calculated and strategic in the way that they share their opinions and make decisions.
Right.
That could probably be to a fault in some cases, but our way is also to a fault in many cases where we're very consensus driven and everybody's voicing their opinion and there's no reservation. So that was interesting as well. But I feel like it led to when decisions were made, it was like a very like strong, firm movement in a certain direction, for better or for worse. I think in Singapore, they did a really good job they were Singaporean through and through. I mean, that office, they celebrated their culture, their holidays, their being together. The camaraderie was really like similar to Japan. Everybody ate lunch together, but different in the way that they honored Japan's design and commitment to the brand, but in their own way. And they had their own flair to the way that they approached their business. And they also had this unique, it's akin to Europe, because, Europe has to deal with all these different markets and languages. And I think other countries take that for granted, how drastically different, the populations are. And Southeast Asia has the same challenge, with the Philippines or Vietnamese and, Indians. It's just like completely different. You get grouped into one region and it's just like absolutely not... Right. Doesn't apply. One message doesn't apply at all. So that was really a learning experience for me to start to recognize, wow, like there's just these people are all so different from each other. And one thing that I really also was impressed with in Singapore is it truly is a hub and a very welcomed space to all of those markets. And you see the presence of everybody, and I blended in.
Right.
Which was an interesting thing for me because, I'm American. I sound American. I was born and raised in America, but I look Sri Lankan. There's a ton of Sri Lankans who are in Singapore working and living. I started to realize that I didn't know how to introduce myself anymore. And, I did, in America, I would say I'm Sri Lankan, but out there, I couldn't really say I'm Sri Lankan. I had to say I'm American.
Right.
That Singapore is very welcoming and they celebrate everyone's holidays, the Hindus, the Christians. So you get to observe that and take part in all of the celebrations and the different areas of just learn so much around that. It's not like a one-sided view of the calendar year.
And how long did it take for you to figure out your next plans from there? Did you just take it easy for a while, or did you just jump right back into it, just eager to get back into the San Francisco tech scene?
And, I'm always trying to take it easy, and then something about me just won't let me rest. So right. Yeah, we got back, and you kind of feel at a loss coming back from abroad to, at least to the US. There's not everybody's going to look at your resume and say, wow, there was a lot of folks looking at my resume and going, okay, are you still hitting all the buzz points that's going on here,
right?
What's going on in the microcosm of San Francisco, and who do you know, and what tech company are you coming from before this,
right? Versus,
oh, look, you worked in all these, across all these markets, and you have all this knowledge, and not a lot of that came through as I thought it might have. Even to this day, I wish I was leveraging more of my experience abroad than I am. And that's tough to grapple with.
But also, I guess as we wrap up our conversation here, I definitely wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your new foundation and, what you're doing with that, helping people to go abroad.
Yeah, not to get into the unfortunate details, but we did experience a pretty heavy tragedy that struck our son, who we lost in the first year when we got back in a accident. Rising from those ashes and post-traumatic experience here, we decided to form a foundation called the Live Like Leo Foundation. And it's really giving an opportunity for the youth to become global citizens by traveling abroad, and not just traveling abroad, but also contributing to the communities abroad. So we just sent 16 students, high school to college students, last summer to Costa Rica, where they were on a turtle reserve and they did consensus data. They interacted with the community. They learned about each other. Everybody was going through sort of during pandemic trauma and stress, and they were all able to formulate like bonds and experiences outside of their, closed sort of space and communities that they were in. And it's just made them big, bolder, better, as we say, global citizens. And so our foundation is committed to continuing to sponsor and provide support to these types of students to go out with our partner, Global Glimpse, to Latin American countries and have this experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a wonderful organization. Obviously,
what you're saying, with our son Leo, it's absolutely shaped. He was 2.5 when we went to Japan, and he, grew up his formative years going to school and being abroad, and the level of inclusion and compassion and kindness, and just being blind to any type of differences between all of the children that he crossed paths with. And he brought that back to the U.S. And we really saw that his experiences abroad helped open his perspective. That's the kind of thing that we want to pull through with these students. But yeah, definitely, check us out on livelikeleo.org, and you can donate on our platform there, or even just buy any of our merch. Proceeds go to the foundation.
It's amazing to connect and hear your story.
Thanks so much.